Hello guys, in this video we're gonna talk about Sicilian defense for black and about Smith-Morra Gambit in particular. Because if you, like me, always play Sicilian with black and you love Sicilian, you sometimes face this beast named Smith-Morra Gambit and you are confused and you try to recall how to play it because it happens quite seldom and you try to invent something on the way. That was how I felt even 2 times on this week. So now I suggest you to learn my mistakes. Let's go, Smith-Morra Gambit for black. My first blitz game started with e4, I played c5, white played d4, and here of course I take, because if somebody trades central pawn for not central pawn, you should just take. And here, surprise, c3, mid Smith-Morra Gambit. And here of course I tried to remember how to play it, and the answer was just to take it, because if somebody suggests you Smith-Morra Gambit, you should accept it. Somebody advises to move d3 to avoid main lines, but it's not the best option because white could move c4, take this good center, then they capture back this pawn and they have just good advantages. It's not the best option for black, that's why the correct answer here just to accept the gambit. Knight c3 played my opponent, and I played knight c6, and it was the main line. After that, white continued their development, their natural development with bishop c4, and here you played d6, because I want to play knight f6, but I'm afraid of e5 movement. Try to prevent it with d6, taking control over this e5 point. This is important square, e5. White continue pressuring to e5. And here I develop my another knight, knight f6. And I thought I took the control over this square. But anyway, e5 threat still exists. And that was how my opponent followed the game, e5. I just captured automatically. And here what can we see? That white just trade queens, and here when you play blitz you naturally want to take it with the knight, and that was what I did in my game, and that is how absolute majority of players do when they play black. Why everybody automatically capture with the knight is the question. Maybe everybody afraid moving their king in the beginning of the game. They're afraid to leave their king without castling so much, so they just naturally take in with the horse. And this is the mistake, and we'll understand it later, but now let's check my game. I also took with the knight. And now just take a small pause and try to find the best move for white. I thought you found it, of course, I also got it. Knight b5. This fork threatened, I didn't know how to defend from. And here, try to guess, what is the most popular move according to the Lichess database among all the players? Of course, everybody tries to defend this square with the king. King d7. On the first glance, it seems like the only defense. I didn't do this mistake. I'll show you later how did I try to defend. And you now take another pause and try to finish the game with the white, right, in a couple of moves. I sure you found it. It's just knight e5 check, and appears king has no way to go because all the squares captured with the knights and the bishop, and king just has to go back and get this checkmate, knight c7. That's the end of the story here, and that's the most popular trap in Smith-Morra Gambit. You should remember and not to get into it, because millions of games ended like this. Let's repeat from the beginning, just to remember it and never get into it. e4, c5, d4, cd, c3, we accept, knight c3, knight c6, bishop c4, I will play d6 of course to take control of the e5 square, knight f3, knight f6, it's normal main line, and here after e5 you take white take, and you never capture it with the knight. It's the main mistake. You should capture it with the king, because if you take with the knight, you're gonna get this knight b5, and if you're gonna defend it with the king, you're just gonna get this checkmate in the beginning. King e8, knight c7, checkmate. Don't do this mistake. Let's return a bit to this critical moment. After white captured the queen, what was in my game, I also captured with the knight, got this knight b5. I've noticed this mistake. King d7, I just move rook to b8, and they took here, and I moved here, and they developed here, and I didn't lose immediately, but the position is really bad for black. I do not wish you to get this and to defend this losing position. So let's just remember that capturing queen with the knight is a mistake. So let's learn how to play correctly. Let's return to this critical moment again. When we take, and here you just relax, you just exhale, and you don't take this knight, you just capture with the king to avoid this knight b5 threatening. And it's actually not bad that king is not castled anymore, because there are no queens anymore, and after queens are traded, there is no need to castle actually. So it's normally to keep king in the center. But the most attentive from you would notice that here we have this threatening from another side, from the king's flank, king g5, symmetrical threatening to f7 to make a fork, right? But here you should remember one magic move. It's knight a5, and you can even lure white to counter trap. White just happily take this pawn with a check. They think they're making check, they're making fork, and we just slide our king to e8. And of course it's a blitz game. White just took to f7, they should took the rook, and after that we just capture their bishop, and appears there's nothing to go for this knight, and we just go in to take it back, right? We just go in to develop this bishop and come with the king to this knight, and white cannot interrupt this plan. After that, we will have two minor pieces for one rook, which is winning for black. Let's return back a bit. So, after knight g5, knight a5, white captures with a check, we go here, and if they can see that they cannot take the rook because bishop is hanging, they try to avoid it, but appears there is nothing to go with the bishop, continue defending this knight, because these squares are captured with the knight, this captured with the knight and the bishop, right? And if they go somewhere else, we just capture the knight, and again we have an extra minor piece and we just win. So just remember this magic knight a5 counter trap. You could trap your opponent. Let's return position back after the queen's trading. So here we can see the most obvious knight g5 move appears to be a mistake, and we could just trap white. Just remember this knight a5. But what if they just take a pawn, you would ask, right? Can they? Seems no, because we just block the bishop with e6. It cannot go back, and we just threaten to move the king here and to capture the piece. How to defend it? Maybe with the knight, but here we just defend our pawn with the king, because there were already two attacking pieces here. We just defending, and now we're threatening with h6 movement to kick away this knight and to capture this bishop. So the bishop is lost here, right? What else can white do here? They can go bishop g5, right? And after king e7, they take, and they rescue their bishop. But let's look at the position what we have. We have just strong central extra pawn, and this pawn center is strong in general, and we have this bishop's pair, which is really good for endgame. Let's return to the beginning and just repeat all the key moments. e4, c5 Sicilian, d4, capture, and white doesn't capture, they play c3, Smith-Morra Gambit, we accept it, knight c3, knight c6, bishop c4, d6, important move to control this, knight f3, knight f6, e5 anyway, we are not scared, we just take, letting trade the queens, exhale, taking with the king is the first important moment here, just take with the king, not the knight, please, not the knight. And after knight g5, we are not scared with this threatening, we just remember another second important moment here, knight a5. And in our best scenario, white are trapped with knight f6, king e8, white takes, we take, and we capture back this knight, and we have two minor pieces against one rook. In the second scenario, not the best but also good for us, they do not go to g5, they just take the pawn, and we block this bishop, and they try to rescue it. We go with the king, they trade, they save their bishop, but we have an extra pawn, and this strong bishop, this one would develop here on this strong diagonal, and we are so fine here. So that is how you're supposed to play accepted Smith-Morra Gambit. So just try to play it and write comments if you faced it. And let's go to my second game. My second Smith-Morra game was not so tragic as the first one, and I didn't face any problem at all, just because my opponent moved the second popular move, not the main line, but the second main line. It doesn't give me any problem. It was like this: e4, c5, d4, cd, c3, we accept, and the main line, as you remember, was knight c3, and the second popular move here is bishop c4. Here I just take another pawn, white take with the bishop, since they have strong bishop pair, and it reminds me Danish Gambit, but with this e7 pawn on place, which is on e5 on Danish Gambit. And that's the better option, because now I have this e6 limiting move. So e6, I just limit this bishop, and it doesn't threaten anymore. White moved queen b3, pressuring maybe this. I just naturally develop my knight, threatening with the fork. They try to prevent this fork, but anyway, knight a5, because queen defend this square. They take, I take with the check, and they have to defend it with the knight. I develop my bishop, pinning this knight again, and they have to defend it, knight f3, and here I defend my knight, and here my opponent just made the final mistake. A3 was a mistake, of course, because I think you found the winning for white, right? Just take a pause. Yes, sure, I just can trade one minor piece, and after that I take another pawn, totally ruining for white. So my second game didn't face any problem, just because white didn't play the main line. So that was how I played to Smith-Morra Gambit this week, and you please share yours. Bye!